exactly 11:47 p.m., the most feared mafia boss in the city walked into his own engagement party and saw his bride standing beside another man. Not just any man. His most loyal lieutenant. The music didn't stop. The champagne glasses didn't fall. No one screamed. Because no one else understood what that single glance meant. In this world, betrayal isn't loud. It's quiet. Polite. Dressed in silk and diamonds. 3 hours earlier, he had signed a peace treaty that would end a decade of bloodshed. One signature. One alliance marriage. One woman he had sworn never to love. But she had already made her choice. What nobody knew what would set the city on fire before dawn was that she wasn't betraying him. She was trying to save him. And by sunrise, one of them would be dead. One would disappear without a trace. And the empire he built from ashes would burn from the inside out. This is not a love story. It's a war disguised as one. Rose did not remember the impact. She remembered the silence. It was the kind of silence that comes after a gunshot in an empty cathedral, vast, echoing, almost holy. Snow drifted down in soft spirals over Route 47, covering the dark stain spreading beneath her like a secret the night was eager to hide. Her breath was barely visible, a fragile thread dissolving into winter air. To anyone passing by, she would have looked already gone. Samuel Trevor believed she was. He did not look back when he left her there. His hands were steady on the steering wheel, jaw locked, eyes hollow rather than furious. Rage had already burned through him. What remained was a colder thing certainty. He had warned her not to lie. He had begged her, in his own fractured way, to choose him over whatever shadow had been following her these past weeks. When she hesitated, when she whispered a name that wasn't his, something inside him snapped with the quiet precision of a pulled trigger. By the time his truck disappeared into the white horizon, Samuel had convinced himself it was necessary. Mercy disguised as brutality, a clean ending. He never noticed the black sedan parked a quarter-mile away, headlights off, engine humming patiently in the dark. Theo Smet stepped out only after Samuel's taillights vanished completely. He moved without hurry, boots pressing deliberate impressions into the fresh snow. He had been watching Samuel for 3 months, studying patterns, temper, fractures in his discipline. Tonight was never supposed to unfold like this. But Theo had anticipated the breaking point. He had even nudged events toward it. A misplaced file, a carefully delivered rumor, a photograph slipped where it would be found. The first twist was not that Samuel lost control. It was that Theo knew he would. He just hadn't calculated that Rose would be the one to bleed for it so soon. Theo reached her and dropped to one knee. Up close, she looked younger, softer than she had across surveillance screens. Snow rested on her lashes like fragile crystals, almost beautiful. He brushed it away with gloved fingers and pressed 2 fingers against her throat. Nothing. Then there. Faint. A whisper of rhythm, stubborn and irregular. Alive. Barely. For a moment, the world tilted. Theo was not a man ruled by emotion. He built strategies the way other men built houses brick by brick. Without sentiment, people were variables. Outcomes were equations. Rose had been a variable too. The fiancé, the leverage, the fracture point in Samuel Trevor's empire. Yet as he looked at her pale face, a dangerous thought surfaced if she dies. I will not settle for dismantling him. I will erase him. The intensity of that realization unsettled him more than the blood soaking into the snow. He lifted her carefully, sliding one arm beneath her shoulders, the other beneath her knees. Her head fell against his chest, and he felt the weak flutter of her heartbeat through layers of fabric. It was irrational how fiercely he focused on that small pulse, as though willing it to strengthen by sheer force of will. Inside the sedan, warmth slowly reclaimed her frozen skin. Theo pressed a cloth against the wound at her side and dialed a number that had never been saved in any contact list. When the call connected, he spoke only 4 words: prepare the lower suite. The clinic he took her to did not exist on any public record. It was a place for inconvenient injuries and invisible recoveries, owned by men who understood silence better than morality. As doctors worked. Theo remained outside the operating room, hands clasped behind his back, expression carved from stone. But his mind was not still. 3 months ago, he had set out to destroy Samuel Trevor's network from within. Samuel's temper made him predictable. His obsession with control made him vulnerable. And Rose sweet, intelligent, tragically loyal. Rose had been the crack in the armor. Theo had intended to exploit her proximity, to let jealousy and suspicion corrode the foundation of Samuel's rule. He had not intended to feel anything when she smiled during their staged encounters. He had not expected the warmth in her voice when she defended Samuel, even when evidence suggested she shouldn't. She loved dangerously. That was her flaw. She believed men could be saved, even monsters. The surgeon emerged an hour later. She's stable. The wound was deep but missed anything vital. Another few minutes in that cold, and we'd be having a different conversation. Theo nodded once. Relief was an unfamiliar sensation, unwelcome in its intensity. She'll wake in time. When he finally entered the dim recovery room, Rose lay surrounded by quiet machines and soft light. Color had begun to return to her lips. Without the snow and blood, she looked almost peaceful, as if sleeping after a long day rather than surviving attempted murder. Theo stood at her bedside longer than necessary. "You were never meant to be collateral," he murmured, voice low enough that even he barely heard it. Her fingers twitched. His gaze sharpened. Slowly, painfully, her eyes opened. Confusion flickered first, then recognition not of him, but of survival. She tried to speak, but the effort dissolved into a shallow breath. "You're safe," he said. A lie, perhaps. Safety was relative in their world. Her gaze shifted to him then, properly seeing him for the first time without pretense or staged coincidence. Something unreadable passed between them. Fear was there. Yes, but not only fear. "Samuel," she whispered, the name fragile. Theo's jaw tightened. Here it was, the axis upon which everything turned. "He believes you're dead," Theo replied evenly. Her lashes trembled. A tear slid sideways into her hair. The second twist of the night unfolded quietly in that sterile room. Rose had never betrayed Samuel. The hesitation that drove him to violence had not been about choosing another man. It had been about protecting him from the very investigation Theo had orchestrated. She had discovered fragments of the truth and was trying to shield Samuel from an enemy he didn't know existed. Theo. The irony settled heavily in his chest. "If he thinks I'm dead," she whispered, strength flickering behind her weakness, "then he's in more danger than ever." Theo studied her carefully. Even now, bleeding and betrayed, her first instinct was to protect the man who left her to die. Something shifted within him, then not strategy, not calculation. Something more volatile. "You should be thinking about yourself," he said. "I don't have that luxury. Neither do I." He thought, outside. Snow continued to fall over Route 47, erasing tire tracks, swallowing evidence. By morning, there would be no sign that Rose had ever been there. Samuel Trevor would wake to a world where his greatest vulnerability was gone, unaware that her disappearance would not secure his power, but unravel it. Theo stepped closer to the bed, lowering his voice. "From this moment on, the world believes you're dead. We can use that." Her eyes searched his face. "Why are you helping me? Because I don't know how not to," he almost said. Instead, because wars are won by the living. And for the first time since the snow began to fall, Theo allowed himself to acknowledge the truth he had been resisting. This was no longer just an operation. It was personal, somewhere in the city. Samuel Trevor poured himself a drink with steady hands, unaware that the woman he thought he had erased was breathing under guarded lights, and that the man who planned his downfall was beginning to question which side of the battlefield his heart was drifting toward. The road had no witnesses, but the war had just begun. If this story touched your heart, follow the channel to enjoy many more heart-stirring stories every week. By dawn, Samuel Trevor had already rewritten the night in his mind. Rose was gone. The problem was solved. Weakness excised. He stood at the panoramic window of his penthouse. The city stretched below him in cold geometry. Snow had reached even here, dusting rooftops in deceptive innocence. His reflection in the glass looked unchanged, sharp suit, unshakable posture, a man still in control. Only his eyes betrayed something fractured. He told himself it was exhaustion. Men like Samuel did not regret. They recalibrated. Across the city, in a private medical suite shielded by anonymity and money, Rose watched light crawl across the ceiling. Pain pulsed faintly at her side, a reminder that survival was not gentle. The room was quiet except for the steady hum of machines and the subtle presence of security stationed beyond the door. She had not asked for protection. Theo had assigned it without discussion. He entered just after sunrise, coat removed, sleeves rolled once at the wrist. There was no theatrical concern in his expression, only assessment. "You should still be asleep," he said. "I was," she replied softly. Then I remembered. Memory settled between them like a third presence. Theo stopped at the foot of the bed. He had spent the night reviewing damage reports from Samuel's network. The rumor of Rose's death was already spreading in controlled circles. A body found, an accident, no investigation required. Samuel had influence in all the right departments. Efficient, ruthless. "You have two options," Theo said evenly. Remain dead and let me dismantle him without distraction, or resurface at the right moment and fracture him completely. Rose studied him. Even injured, her gaze held unsettling clarity. You speak as if this is chess. It is. And what am I? He didn't hesitate. The piece he never learned to protect. The words should have sounded strategic. Instead, they felt personal. Silence stretched. She shifted slightly, suppressing a wince. Theo noticed and stepped forward instinctively before catching himself. You miscalculated him, she said quietly. I calculated him precisely. No, she replied. You calculated his anger, not his fear. Theo's eyes sharpened. Explain. Rose drew a careful breath. Samuel doesn't explode because he's cruel. He explodes because he's terrified of losing control, of losing people. He grew up with nothing stable. When he believes something is slipping away, he destroys it first. Theo absorbed this without comment. It aligned disturbingly well with what he had observed, yet he had framed it as ego. Not trauma. She was not excusing Samuel. She was revealing him. You still defend him. Theo noted. I understand him, she corrected. There's a difference. Understanding. The most dangerous form of loyalty. Meanwhile, Samuel sat in a private conference room surrounded by his inner circle. His lieutenant, Adrian Vale, stood across from him, posture rigid. Adrian's expression carried something unreadable guilt, perhaps, or calculation. He had been at the engagement party hours before the incident, standing too close to Rose, saying things that Samuel could not unhear. Any loose ends, Samuel asked. None, Adrian answered smoothly. Route 47 is clean. Samuel held his gaze a second too long. He trusted Adrian. He had built his empire with him, but trust had become a fragile concept overnight. Good, Samuel said. We move forward. Forward meant consolidating power, signing the treaty, expanding territory. It meant pretending the hollow space inside him was strategy rather than absence. Back in the clinic, Theo placed a tablet on the bedside table. Security footage, financial transfers, communications between Samuel and offshore accounts. You wanted to protect him, Theo said. Theo. From me. From this. Rose watched the screen flicker. You're planning to collapse his network publicly? Yes, he'll retaliate. Of course. And innocent people. Theo's jaw tightened. Collateral damage is minimized. Minimized isn't eliminated. The tension between them shifted. Not romantic. Not yet. Something more volatile, two minds colliding over morality in a world that rarely allowed it. You orchestrated the suspicion that night, she said suddenly. The photograph. The rumor. Theo didn't deny it. You wanted him to doubt me. Yes. And you knew what he becomes when he doubts. Theo met her gaze. I didn't intend for him to leave you bleeding in the snow. Intent. Consequence. The ancient divide. For a flicker of a second, anger flashed in her eyes. Not fear, not fragility, but fury. It startled him more than her wound had. You play with people's lives like variables, she whispered. You underestimated how much blood that costs. He stepped closer, voice lower. And you overestimate how much mercy survives in men like him. Their proximity sharpened the air. Neither looked away. A knock interrupted them. One of Theo's men entered, expression tight. There's movement. Samuel's running a quiet internal audit. He suspects something. Theo's mind moved instantly. Samuel was not grieving passively. He was searching. For what Theo asked. For whoever planted the seeds. Theo nodded once, increased counter-surveillance, and monitor Adrian Vale. The guard hesitated. You think I think fear makes intelligent men reckless? Theo replied. When they were alone again, Rose exhaled slowly. If Samuel starts digging, he'll find threads. He always does. That's the point, Theo said. Let him follow them. To you, to a version of me he can't touch. She watched him carefully. You don't just want to defeat him. You want him to know you did. Theo didn't answer, because it was true. Evening descended quietly. Pain medication dulled Rose's edges, but not her mind. She replayed the moment on Route 47 again and again, not the violence, but the look in Samuel's eyes before he walked away. It had not been hatred. It had been devastation masquerading as certainty. Across the city, Samuel stood alone in his private office when his phone vibrated. An unknown number? He rarely answered those. Tonight, he did. Silence greeted him first. Then a single sound. Breathing. Faint? Familiar? His hand tightened around the device. Who is this? No response. Just the softest exhale. His pulse spiked in a way he would never admit. Rose. The name escaped before he could stop it. The line went dead. Miles away. Theo lowered the secondary burner phone and slipped it into his pocket. Rose stared at him from the bed, shock and something like betrayal flashing across her face. "You said I was dead," she whispered. "To the world." He replied calmly. "Not to him. You're provoking him. I'm awakening him." Her heart pounded not from fear, but from the realization that Theo was no longer merely dismantling Samuel's empire. He was dismantling Samuel himself, in his office. Samuel stared at the dark screen, every instinct screaming that the past 24 hours were not what they seemed. Snow could cover blood. It could not erase intuition. For the first time since Route 47, doubt crept in. And doubt, in a man like Samuel Trevor, was far more dangerous than grief. Samuel did not sleep. He replayed the sound over and over in his mind, the breath on the other end of the line. It had not been imagination. It had not been coincidence. He knew the rhythm of Rose's breathing the way a man knows the cadence of his own name. There are intimacies that outlive logic. By morning, the city felt different. Not hostile. Watching. Samuel stood in the center of his office as Adrian finished outlining the internal audit results. Funds intact. Communications secure? No obvious breach. On paper. His empire remained seamless. On paper. "Run it again," Samuel said. Adrian hesitated only a fraction of a second. "We already combed through every again." The command landed colder than usual. Adrian nodded and left without argument. But something in his posture had shifted. Samuel noticed. He noticed everything now. Doubt was a blade. And it had begun carving through loyalties he once considered unbreakable. When he was alone, Samuel opened a locked drawer and removed a thin velvet box. Inside lay Rose's engagement ring, retrieved before he drove away that night. He had not realized he'd taken it until hours later. The diamond caught the light like a frozen star. He closed the box sharply, anger rising not at her, not even at himself, but at the uncertainty clawing through his composure. Dead women do not breathe into telephones. Across the city, Rose stood for the first time since the incident. One hand braced against the edge of a polished table. Pain flared through her side, sharp but manageable. Theo watched from a measured distance, arms folded, expression unreadable. "You shouldn't be upright yet," he said. "I shouldn't be alive yet either," she replied evenly. The quiet strength in her unsettled him more than weakness ever could. He had expected gratitude, fear, confusion. What he encountered instead was resolve. "You called him?" she said. "Yes." Why to confirm a hypothesis? And what was the hypothesis that grief would immobilize him? Doubt will mobilize him. She turned to face him fully. "You're escalating." "I'm accelerating." Rose held his gaze. "You're not dismantling him anymore. You're provoking him into a war." Theo's voice lowered. "He already started one the moment he left you in the snow." The words struck harder than intended. For a second, silence thickened between them. "He thought I betrayed him," she said quietly. "And you didn't." "No." Theo stepped closer, just enough to close the emotional distance without touching her. "Then help me understand something. Why protect a man who chose suspicion over you?" Her answer came without hesitation. "Because I know what he becomes when he thinks he has nothing left." The room felt smaller. Theo studied her as though recalculating variables he had dismissed too quickly. Love, he realized, was not softness. In Rose, it had hardened into something almost defiant. A discreet knock interrupted them. Theo's head of security entered. Expression tight. Samuel visited Route 47 at dawn. He stood there for 20 minutes. Rose's breath caught. He found nothing. The guard continued. "But he's not convinced." Theo nodded once. "He won't be." When the guard exited, Rose's composure cracked for the first time. He went back. "Yes." He wouldn't do that if he was certain. Theo didn't respond. He didn't need to. The implication was clear. Samuel Trevor was unraveling. Hours later, Samuel stood on Route 47 again, snow crunching under polished shoes. The road looked innocent now, blank and undisturbed. No blood, no marks, no evidence of violence. He closed his eyes briefly, replaying the scene, her body in the snow, the unnatural stillness. He knelt, pressing his palm against the frozen ground where he remembered her lying. Cold shot through his skin. He welcomed it. Someone had been there after him. The realization arrived not as suspicion, but as certainty. Samuel rose slowly, gaze scanning the tree line. If Rose was alive, then someone had taken her. And if someone had taken her, then someone had been watching him. The thought did not terrify him. It electrified him. Back in the clinic's secure suite, Theo reviewed satellite timestamps and traffic logs. He had anticipated Samuel's return to the scene. He had also anticipated the moment Samuel would understand that he was not alone that night. "What happens when he realizes you orchestrated it?" Rose asked. "He won't realize," Theo said calmly. "Not yet. And when he does," Theo met her eyes, "then he'll come for me." A strange stillness passed between them, charged and unspoken. "You're not afraid," she observed. "I don't operate on fear." "That's not what I meant." He knew. She wasn't asking about physical danger. She was asking about something more intimate, the risk of caring. Before he could respond, his phone vibrated. A message from an encrypted channel. "Adrian Vale has scheduled a private meeting. Location undisclosed." Theo's gaze sharpened. "He's moving," Rose said quietly. "Yes. Toward you, toward whoever he believes is destabilizing Samuel." She watched him absorb the information without visible reaction. It was almost frightening how composed he remained in the face of escalation. "Don't underestimate Adrian," she said. "He's loyal." Theo's expression shifted slightly. "No, he's ambitious." The difference mattered. Night settled heavy over the city. In a dimly lit warehouse on the outskirts, Adrian stood alone, staring at a burner phone in his hand. He had traced fragments of financial anomalies subtle enough to avoid suspicion, deliberate enough to signal intelligence at work. Someone was playing a deeper game. He dialed a number. Across town, Theo's phone lit up. He didn't answer. Instead, he turned to Rose. "The board is shifting, and you're still certain you're the one moving the pieces?" A faint smile touched his lips. "I always am." But as he looked at her alive when she should not have been, steady when she had every reason to collapse, he felt something unfamiliar threading through his certainty. Unpredictability. Meanwhile, Samuel stood alone in his office once more when another message arrived. Not a call this time. A photograph. Blurry, dimly lit, but unmistakable. Rose. Alive. His breath stilled. The image disappeared from his screen seconds later, replaced by a single line of text. "You buried the wrong truth." Samuel's composure fractured not outwardly, but internally, tectonic and silent. Whoever was behind this did not want him grieving. They wanted him hunting. And for the first time since the snow fell, Samuel Trevor allowed himself to hope, because hope meant she was alive. And if she was alive, then the man who took her had just made the worst mistake of his life. Samuel did not smash the phone. He did not shout. He did not summon his men in a storm of fury. He simply stared at the place on the screen where her face had been seconds before it vanished. And something far more dangerous than anger took root clarity. Rose was alive. The relief hit him first, sharp and disorienting. Like air returning to lungs he hadn't realized were empty. It was followed immediately by humiliation. He had left her there. He had believed the stillness. He had walked away from the only person who had ever looked at him without calculation. And someone else had picked her up. That was the part that settled into his bones like poison. "Trace it," he said quietly to the tech analyst summoned within minutes. His voice held no tremor. "Every relay, every reroute, I don't care how many layers they built into it. It was scrubbed within seconds." The analyst replied cautiously. Whoever sent it knew what they were doing. Samuel's jaw tightened. "Good. Then I'm not dealing with an amateur across the city." Theo stood before a wall of screens in the secure operations room beneath the clinic. He watched the ripple effect in real time, Samuel's internal network tightening, digital defenses recalibrating, movement increasing across strategic locations. The photograph had done exactly what he intended. But something about the way Samuel responded unsettled him. He had expected chaos. Instead, he saw discipline. "You're impressed," Rose said softly from the doorway. Theo didn't turn immediately. "I respect competence." She stepped into the room slowly, strength returning to her posture day by day. She wore one of the clinic's simple black coats. It made her look less like a patient and more like someone already planning her next move. "You underestimated him," she said. "I misjudged the timing." Theo corrected. "You thought grief would fracture him. I thought guilt would." Rose crossed her arms lightly, studying the screens. "You don't know him the way you think you do." Theo finally faced her. "Then enlighten me." She held his gaze without hesitation. "When Samuel feels cornered, he becomes strategic. When he feels betrayed, he becomes reckless. But when he feels he's made a mistake," she paused, "he becomes relentless." The word lingered between them. relentless. Theo absorbed it in silence. He had triggered suspicion. He had ignited doubt. But perhaps he had also awakened something else, something harder to predict. Then he'll come faster, Theo said at last. And harder. A quiet tension unfolded in the space between them, not adversarial, not romantic, but electric. They were no longer discussing Samuel as an abstract opponent. They were orbiting the reality that all three of them were now bound by something irreversible. Later that evening, Samuel convened a private meeting with Adrian in the upper level of an unfinished high-rise overlooking the river. Wind howled through exposed beams, the skeletal structure casting long shadows in the city's glow. "You lied to me," Samuel said without preamble. Adrian did not flinch. "About what Route 47? A beat of silence. There were no witnesses. Adrian replied evenly. "I didn't ask about witnesses." Samuel's eyes darkened. "I asked if you lied." Adrian's composure held, but something flickered beneath it calculation. Perhaps even fear. "If you're implying I had anything to do with I'm not implying?" Samuel stepped closer. "I'm narrowing." Adrian's loyalty had never been questioned before. They had built an empire from scraps, bled for territory, negotiated with men who preferred bullets to contracts. But loyalty under pressure reveals fault lines. "She's alive," Samuel said quietly. This time, Adrian's reaction was real. Surprise, sharp and unfiltered. "That's impossible," he breathed. Samuel watched him carefully. If Adrian was acting, he was brilliant. "Someone took her," Samuel continued. "Someone wants me to know she's alive. And you think it's me? I think someone inside my circle gave them access?" Adrian met his gaze squarely. "If I wanted you vulnerable, Samuel, I wouldn't send you hope." The words struck deeper than expected. Hope was vulnerability. Miles away, Theo received confirmation that Samuel and Adrian had met. No gunshots, no immediate fallout. That, too, was interesting. He didn't eliminate him. Rose observed when Theo relayed the update. No, because he still trusts him. For now. Rose moved closer to one of the screens, studying the frozen image of Samuel entering the high-rise. There was something different in the way he carried himself, less impulsive, more deliberate. "You've turned this into something else," she said quietly. Theo glanced at her. "Explain." "You wanted to dismantle his empire." Her eyes remained on the screen. "Now you're reshaping him." Theo said nothing. She turned to face him fully. "If you push him too far, he won't just come for you. He'll burn everything between you." A faint smile touched Theo's mouth. "You think I haven't prepared for that? I think you haven't prepared for what happens if he reaches me first." The words landed heavier than she intended. Theo's expression shifted barely. "But enough. He won't. You can't guarantee that." His voice lowered. "I can." The certainty in it carried something beyond strategy. Rose felt it, and for the first time since she woke in that sterile room, she realized the most dangerous shift wasn't in Samuel. It was in Theo. He was no longer operating purely on calculation. The lines were blurring. Later that night, as rain replaced snow and washed the city clean, a black SUV slowed near the clinic's unmarked entrance. Inside, a man studied the building with quiet focus before speaking into a concealed transmitter. "Visual confirmation," he murmured. "Target may be inside." The voice on the other end responded calmly. "Do not engage. Confirm only." The man's gaze lingered on the darkened windows. Above, unaware of the eyes below. Rose stood alone near the glass, looking out over the city lights. She pressed her hand lightly to her healing wound. Not in pain, but in grounding. Behind her, Theo approached silently. "He's closer than you think," she said without turning. "So am I," he replied. Far across town, Samuel's phone vibrated once more. A single message. "She's not where you think." This time, Samuel smiled, because if someone was trying to misdirect him, it meant they were worried. And men who worry make mistakes. The fault lines were no longer hidden beneath snow. They were widening, quietly, beneath all of them. Samuel did not respond to the message. He deleted it, set the phone down, and walked to the window of his office where rain streaked the glass in restless patterns. Misdirection meant proximity. Whoever was orchestrating this wanted him uncertain, reactive. That alone revealed something critical. They believed he could still be manipulated. They were wrong. He had already adjusted the board. Pull every property transfer within a 5-mile radius of Route 47 in the last 6 months. He instructed his analyst minutes later. Shell companies included. Cross-reference with private medical supply deliveries. Quietly, the analyst blinked. You think she was treated nearby? I think whoever took her didn't want to move her far. Samuel replied, not with that kind of injury. Across the city? Theo studied a similar map illuminated on a digital screen. He had anticipated digital tracing, but not analog inference. Samuel wasn't chasing signals. He was thinking like a man who knew how fear altered logistics. He's narrowing the radius, Rose said, leaning against the table beside him. Yes, Theo admitted. You didn't expect that. I expected speed, not restraint. Rose watched the pulsing dots marking Samuel's properties and affiliates. He's not looking for you, she said softly. He's looking for me. Theo turned to her. He'll find neither. That's not what I meant. Her voice carried a strange calm. He's not hunting an enemy right now. He's hunting proof. Proof that he hadn't lost her. The subtle distinction unsettled Theo more than he cared to admit. Later that evening, Adrian Vale stepped into a dim bar tucked beneath the overpass by the river. It was the kind of place where conversations dissolved into smoke and no one remembered faces. He didn't order a drink. He waited. 10 minutes passed before a man slid onto the stool beside him. You're being watched, the stranger murmured without looking at him. I assume that's mutual, Adrian replied coolly. You wanted information. I want to know who thinks they can destabilize Samuel Trevor and survive it. A faint chuckle. Survival isn't always the objective. Adrian's jaw tightened. Name? Careful, the stranger warned. Curiosity has consequences. Adrian leaned closer. So does ambition. The stranger finally met his eyes. Theo Smet. The name settled like a dropped coin in still water. Across town, Theo felt the shift before confirmation arrived. Surveillance flagged Adrian's meeting within minutes. Facial recognition caught the contact and intermediary, once tied to a European syndicate known for corporate sabotage rather than open warfare. He knows your name, Rose said when Theo relayed the update. Yes. And that was inevitable. She studied him carefully. You're not surprised. I planned for exposure. Did you plan for the way Samuel will react when he learns it's you? Theo didn't answer immediately. Samuel sat alone when Adrian returned with the name. Theo Smet, Adrian said carefully. Corporate acquisitions, off-record partnerships, no public criminal record. Clean enough to be dangerous. Samuel rolled the name across his mind. It sounded almost unremarkable. That bothered him more than notoriety would have. Connection to Rose, he asked. None on file. Find one? Adrian hesitated. Samuel, if he's the one behind this, he's been planning for months. Good, Samuel replied. So have I. Rain intensified, blurring the city into reflections of itself. At the clinic, Rose stood in the narrow corridor outside her room, phone in hand. It had been hours since she'd asked for it, hours since Theo had reluctantly allowed limited access under surveillance. You don't trust me, she said without accusation. I trust outcomes, he replied. She looked at him, something fragile flickering beneath her composure. You're not the only one who can plan. Before he could respond, her phone vibrated. Unknown number. Theo's eyes sharpened. Don't. She answered anyway. Silence greeted her at first. Then a voice. Rose. Her breath stilled. Samuel's voice was not loud. It wasn't angry. It carried something far more destabilizing restraint. You're alive, he said. She closed her eyes briefly. Yes. Theo watched every micro-expression cross her face. Shock, relief, conflict. Where are you? Samuel asked. She didn't answer. I went back. He continued quietly. There was no blood. Her throat tightened. You shouldn't have gone back. I shouldn't have left. The words fractured something inside her. Theo stepped forward, hand hovering near the phone. She turned slightly away from him, shielding the call with her body. Who has you? Samuel asked. No one has me. That's not what it looks like. A flicker of steel entered her tone. You don't get to question what it looks like. Silence crackled across the line. Come back, Samuel said finally. It wasn't a command. It was something dangerously close to a plea. Theo felt the shift like a physical force. This wasn't manipulation. It wasn't strategy. It was raw. Rose swallowed. I can't. Because of him? She hesitated a fraction too long. Samuel heard it. Theo saw it. The triangle between them solidified, no longer abstract. Tell him, Samuel said softly, that I know his name. The call ended. Rose lowered the phone slowly. The air in the corridor felt thinner. He's accelerating, she whispered. Theo's voice was calm, but something beneath it was not. So am I. You heard him. Yes. He's not hunting to kill you. Theo's gaze darkened. Not yet. She stepped closer, close enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from her skin. This isn't about territory anymore. He met her eyes. It never was. For a suspended moment, neither moved. The tension between them had evolved less about strategy, more about proximity. Shared danger had a way of distorting boundaries. Outside, in the rain-slicked streets below, a black SUV idled once more near the building. This time, it didn't just observe. It waited. And miles away, Samuel stood alone in his office, the echo of her voice still vibrating in his chest. He wasn't certain where she was, but he was certain of one thing. Theo Smet had not taken Rose from him. Theo had walked into a war that no longer belonged solely to him. Hunters rarely realize the moment they stop being the only predator in the room. By the time they do, the other one is already close enough to strike. The SUV did not leave. It waited through the rain. Engine low, headlights dark. Inside, two men watched the unmarked clinic entrance with the patience of professionals who understood that movement revealed more than force ever could. Upstairs, Theo had already seen them. They're not here to retrieve, he said quietly, eyes fixed on the surveillance feed. They're here to confirm. Rose stood beside him, arms folded tightly across her chest. Samuel's men, no. His gaze sharpened slightly. Adrian's? The distinction mattered. Adrian did not move without reason. If he was verifying her location independently, it meant he was no longer operating purely under Samuel's directives. It meant a secondary game was unfolding, one Samuel might not even see. Will he tell him? Rose asked. That depends on what he wants. And what does he want? Theo turned to her, voice level. Power? The word landed between them with quiet inevitability. Below, one of the men in the SUV stepped out, crossing the street under the guise of a pedestrian. He paused briefly near the building's side entrance, eyes scanning architectural details with subtle precision. Inside, Theo made a decision. Pack, he said. Rose blinked. Now they're close enough to risk breach. I won't wait for escalation. She studied his face. There was no panic there, only calculation sharpened by something else. Protective instinct. You're moving me again, she said softly. I'm removing a variable. Her lips curved faintly despite the tension. You keep saying that. He didn't answer. Within 15 minutes, the secure elevator descended to the underground garage. Theo's team moved with seamless efficiency. No raised voices, no wasted motion. Rose followed Theo toward a matte black vehicle waiting with its engine already running. As the car pulled away through the secondary exit, the SUV's passenger received a quiet message through his earpiece. Movement detected. He glanced toward the street just in time to catch the reflection of taillights disappearing into traffic. Across town. Samuel's phone vibrated once more. This time it was Adrian. They relocated. Adrian said. Samuel absorbed the information without visible reaction. So you found her. I found movement. That's enough. A pause lingered on the line. Samuel, Adrian began carefully. This is no longer just about Rose. Theo Smet isn't improvising. He's structuring. I know. And if he's this deliberate, then exposing himself by sending that photograph was intentional. Samuel finished. He wants me alert. Adrian hesitated. Then maybe we shouldn't play into it. Samuel's voice cooled. You think I don't know when I'm being baited? I think he expects you to know. Silence settled between them, an unspoken tension that had nothing to do with Rose and everything to do with shifting trust. Set up a meeting, Samuel said finally. With Theo? Adrian exhaled slowly. Direct contact is risky, so is waiting. The call ended. Inside the moving car, Rose leaned back against the leather seat, watching city lights blur past the window. Theo sat beside her, posture still. Attention split between the road and the digital feed on his tablet. He knows you moved, she said. Yes, he'll request a meeting. Theo's gaze flicked toward her briefly. You're certain. He doesn't strike blind. He confronts, and you think he wants answers. I think he wants to see you. The statement lingered. Theo considered it. Direct confrontation had not been his preferred path. He favored structural collapse, quiet destabilization. But perhaps Samuel sought something more primitive, a face to attach to the disruption. He won't come alone, Theo said. Neither will you. Their eyes met, tension threading between them like a wire pulled too tight. You don't have to be part of this, Theo said suddenly. Rose's expression shifted. I already am. I can relocate you entirely. New identity, new city, and let you and Samuel destroy each other from a distance. She shook her head slightly. No. He studied her as though seeing her from a new angle. She was no longer the protected piece. She was choosing the board. You're not afraid. He observed. I am, she replied honestly. But fear isn't the same as retreat. The car slowed as they entered an underground garage beneath a private waterfront property, one of Theo's unlisted holdings. The elevator carried them up to a glass-walled living space overlooking dark water. The rain had softened to a mist. The world outside felt suspended. Rose walked to the window, fingers brushing the cool surface. If you meet him, she said quietly, don't underestimate what he'll sacrifice. Theo joined her, close enough that their reflections merged faintly in the glass. And if he underestimates what I won't? The space between them narrowed without intention. You think this is about ego, she said. It's about control. No, she countered softly. It's about me. The honesty in her voice stripped away layers of pretense. Theo's jaw tightened slightly. You're the catalyst. I'm the fault line. Their proximity shifted from strategic to personal in a single breath. The air felt charged, not fragile, but combustible. Before either could step back, Theo's phone vibrated. A message. Meeting requested. Tomorrow, midnight. Neutral ground. Theo read it once, then handed the screen to Rose. She didn't need to ask who it was from. He's not waiting, she murmured. No. Will you go? Yes. Alone. A pause. No. Her gaze held his. He'll expect that. I'm not interested in meeting his expectations. Across the city. Samuel stood on the rooftop of his building, rain dampening his coat as he stared across the skyline. He felt the shift in momentum. The game had moved from shadows to direct engagement. He welcomed it. For days, uncertainty had coiled inside him like a restrained storm. Now, at least, it had direction. He wasn't meeting Theo to negotiate territory. He was meeting him to measure him. Back at the waterfront property, Rose stepped away from the glass, turning fully toward Theo. If something goes wrong tomorrow, she said carefully, you need to promise me one thing. I don't make promises lightly. This one isn't strategic. He waited. If you have to choose between winning and ending this, choose ending it. His expression shifted almost imperceptibly. You assume those are separate outcomes, he said. She held his gaze steadily. They are. Silence stretched between them, heavy but not hostile. Outside, the water moved in restless patterns beneath the dim lights. Somewhere in the city, two men prepared to stand face to face for the first time. Neither of them fully understood that the meeting itself would not be the most dangerous moment of the night. The most dangerous moment would be the one neither of them saw coming. Neutral ground was never truly neutral. It was simply a place where both sides agreed to pretend. The meeting point was an abandoned opera house at the edge of the old district, its facade cracked but still elegant beneath the city's dim lights. Midnight arrived without ceremony. Rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and reflective, as if the world itself were holding its breath. Samuel entered first. He came with two men who remained outside the main doors, shadows positioned in calculated intervals. Inside, the vast hall smelled faintly of dust and velvet decay. Chandeliers hung overhead like suspended constellations, their crystals catching the faint emergency lighting. Theo arrived 3 minutes later. He did not rush. He did not hesitate. His presence carried the quiet authority of someone accustomed to stepping into danger without announcing it. For a moment, they simply regarded one another across the expanse of the stage floor. Samuel Trevor looked exactly as Theo had imagined controlled. Sharp, the kind of man whose stillness concealed violence rather than diffused it. Theo, in return, appeared composed in a way that bordered on surgical. So, Samuel said at last, voice echoing lightly through the empty hall. You're the architect. Theo's expression did not shift. And you're the man who buries mistakes. A faint smile touched Samuel's mouth. Humorless. You sent me proof she was alive. Yes. Why to remove uncertainty? Samuel took a slow step forward. You mistake me if you think uncertainty weakens me. I don't, Theo replied calmly. I think it focuses you. Silence coiled between them, thick with unspoken calculations. You could have killed her, Samuel said quietly. You didn't? No. Why Theo held his gaze without flinching. Because she isn't yours to destroy. The words landed harder than any threat. Samuel's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. You've made this personal. It was personal the moment you left her in the snow. The echo of that sentence lingered like a strike. Samuel stepped closer until only a few feet separated them. You orchestrated suspicion. You manipulated proximity. You engineered doubt, all to fracture my control. Yes. And you miscalculated one thing. Theo's eyes narrowed slightly. Which is Samuel's voice lowered. I don't fear losing power. I fear losing her. The confession was not loud, but it was seismic. For the first time, Theo felt something shift beneath his certainty. He had anticipated arrogance, denial, rage. He had not anticipated vulnerability offered without defense. You confuse fear with devotion, Theo said. Samuel's gaze sharpened. You confuse strategy with detachment. A beat passed. Then Samuel continued, voice steady. You didn't just save her. You kept her. Theo did not deny it. And you've placed her between us, Samuel added. No, Theo replied evenly. You did. The air between them grew thinner. Behind the stage curtains, unseen by both men, a third presence adjusted a small device beneath the wooden flooring. A red light blinked once, then steadied. Adrian Vale did not attend meetings without preparation. Back at the waterfront property, Rose stood near the window again, phone in her hand, pulse unsteady despite her composed exterior. She had not been invited to the opera house. She had not insisted on going. But something inside her refused stillness. Her phone vibrated. Unknown number. She answered. Rose, Adrian's voice murmured. Her spine went rigid. Why are you calling me? You should be careful about where they meet. Her breath slowed. What have you done? A pause. Then, almost gently. Insurance. The line went dead. In the opera house. Samuel and Theo were still circling each other verbally, each probing for fracture points. You want to dismantle my empire, Samuel said. Take it. Try. Theo's expression remained calm. This stopped being about territory days ago. Then what is it about Theo did not answer immediately. The truth was dangerously simple. It's about consequence, he said at last. Samuel's eyes darkened. And what consequence do you think I deserve? Theo stepped forward, lowering his voice, the kind that forces you to see what you nearly destroyed. A sudden vibration tremored faintly beneath their feet. Samuel felt it first. Theo noticed it second. Both men froze. The tremor deepened not enough to collapse the structure, but enough to send dust drifting from the rafters. A controlled blast, not catastrophic, but calculated. Samuel's men outside shouted. Theo's earpiece crackled with urgent updates. Structural breach detected. Samuel's gaze snapped toward the stage floor, then back to Theo. You brought explosives. Theo's voice sharpened. No. Realization flickered between them simultaneously. A third player. The tremor subsided as quickly as it began, leaving only the faint scent of smoke and fractured wood. Samuel exhaled slowly. Adrian. Theo's jaw tightened. Back at the waterfront, Rose was already moving, dialing Theo's secure line. He answered before the second ring. Adrian planted something, she said quickly. Insurance. I know. You need to leave. So does he. The line went silent for half a second too long. In the opera house, Samuel's phone vibrated. A message from Adrian. If either of you leave alive, it's because I allowed it. Samuel's expression shifted not with fear, but with a clarity so sharp it bordered on cold fury. Theo saw it. He's escalating beyond you, Theo said quietly. Samuel met his gaze. Beyond both of us. Another faint tremor rippled through the structure. Closer this time. Theo calculated exit routes instantly. Samuel did the same. They were no longer opponents in that moment. They were two men inside someone else's trap. East exit, Theo said. West corridor, Samuel countered. A brief pause. Then, almost imperceptibly, Samuel nodded once. They moved simultaneously. Not together, but not in conflict, two predators temporarily aligned by necessity. Outside, chaos unfolded in controlled bursts. Sirens in the distance. Smoke curling from beneath the stage. Back in the car, waiting beyond the perimeter. Adrian watched the unfolding scene through binoculars. His expression held no visible triumph, only anticipation. Chaos created opportunity, and opportunity created vacancy. As Theo emerged through the east exit, one of his guards downed by debris but alive. He scanned the perimeter for Samuel, across the lot. Samuel stepped out from the west corridor, coat dusted with ash but posture unbroken. Their eyes met across the distance. No words passed between them. But something fundamental had shifted. The war was no longer theoretical. It had detonated. And the most dangerous man in the city might not be either of them. It might be the one who had just forced them to walk out of the same fire alive. Smoke still clung to their coats when they realized the truth. Adrian had not intended to kill them. If he had, the charges would have been deeper, the blast less controlled. No, the explosion had been precise, measured to destabilize, not annihilate. It was a message, not an execution. Chaos is leverage. Across the Opera House parking lot, under the flicker of emergency lights, Samuel and Theo stood facing each other again. This time there was no stage, no theatrical distance, only asphalt, ash, and the sound of approaching sirens. You knew he was ambitious, Samuel said evenly. I knew he was calculating. Theo replied, ambition is simply calculation without patience. Samuel's gaze shifted briefly toward the Opera House. He's forcing a fracture. Yes, between us. Theo's eyes returned to him. Or through us. The distinction lingered. For several seconds. Neither spoke. Two men accustomed to control now confronted a variable neither had fully accounted for a subordinate who had decided to become the architect. You think he wants your empire, Theo said at last. Samuel's expression remained unreadable. He wants vacancy. And you believe I'm the vacancy? Samuel's lips curved faintly, humorless. You inserted yourself. Theo did not deny it. Police sirens drew closer. Both men understood that remaining here was no longer strategic. Temporary ceasefire. Samuel said quietly. Theo studied him. You expect trust. I expect alignment. Until Adrian is handled? The honesty was almost refreshing. Theo considered the proposal. He had initiated a structural dismantling of Samuel's empire. Now the structure was shifting in ways that could destabilize everything, including Rose. 48 hours, Theo said finally. Information exchange? No interference? Samuel nodded once. Agreed. No handshake. No ceremony? Just two predators acknowledging a greater threat. Back at the waterfront property, Rose watched the news alert flash across her screen. Gas leak causes structural damage at historic Opera House. The official narrative was already being shaped. Her phone vibrated. Theo, they're alive, she said before he could speak. Yes. And we have a complication? She closed her eyes briefly. Adrian. Yes. Is Samuel intact? The relief that moved through her was immediate and unguarded. Theo heard it in her breath. You're aligning with him, she said softly. For now. A pause. Be careful, she added. Adrian doesn't just seek power. He seeks legitimacy. If he removes both of you from the equation, he becomes the stabilizing force. Theo finished. And the hero. Theo's voice lowered. I don't intend to give him the opportunity. Hours later, in a secured underground conference room owned by one of Theo's shell corporations, the first exchange occurred. Samuel arrived alone this time. So did Theo. A single table separated them. I've tracked Adrian's offshore transfers. Theo began without preamble, sliding a thin file across the table. He's been reallocating assets quietly for 6 months. Samuel didn't look surprised. He's always prepared contingencies. This isn't contingency, Theo said. It's positioning. Samuel opened the file, scanning the data quickly. His mind moved faster than the pages. He's consolidating under a secondary network, yes. And he waited until you destabilized us to trigger phase 2. Theo met his gaze. You believe I handed him the opportunity. I believe you accelerated it. A beat. And you? Theo asked. What did you accelerate when you left her there? The words were sharp but controlled. Samuel's jaw tightened, but he did not deflect. I misjudged. Theo had not expected that admission. You don't defend it. Theo observed. I don't repeat it. Silence stretched. For the first time since they had begun orbiting each other, the hostility felt tempered, not erased, but redirected. She knows, Samuel said suddenly. Theo's gaze sharpened. Knows what? That I'm meeting you. Theo held his expression neutral. She anticipated it. Samuel studied him carefully. You've grown attached. The statement was not an accusation. It was an assessment. Theo did not answer immediately. Samuel leaned back slightly. That's your vulnerability. And she's yours, Theo replied evenly. Another silence. Then Samuel said something neither of them expected. If this ends with her destroyed again, I will not negotiate a second time. Theo's voice remained calm. It won't. Samuel's eyes narrowed slightly. You sound certain. I am. Across town. Rose stood alone in the dim living room, the city lights reflecting faintly in the glass. She felt the shift in the air, even without being present. Two men who had defined themselves against each other were now aligned by necessity. But alliances forged under pressure are fragile. Her phone vibrated again. Unknown number. She hesitated before answering. "Rose," Adrian's voice murmured. Her pulse steadied rather than spiked. "You're running out of subtlety." A soft chuckle. "On the contrary, I'm refining. You tried to kill them. I tried to remind them that power changes hands quietly." Her voice cooled. "You're not as invisible as you think, and you're not as removed as you hope." A pause. "You love him," Adrian said. Her silence was answer enough. "Which one?" he added. The question landed with surgical precision. Before she could respond, the line disconnected. At the underground meeting, Theo's phone lit up simultaneously with a security alert. Unusual data access from within his own network. Samuel's phone vibrated seconds later. A single message sent to both men. "She's the key." Theo and Samuel looked up at the same time. Understanding dawned in parallel. Adrian was not merely exploiting their rivalry. He was leveraging Rose. "She's exposed," Samuel said. Theo was already on his feet. Not for long. For a fleeting second, there was no rivalry in their expressions. Only urgency. They exited separately but with the same objective. Protect her. At the waterfront property? Rose turned toward the sound of an approaching elevator. Too early for Theo. Too quiet for coincidence. The doors began to slide open. And for the first time since the snow on Route 47, she felt the unmistakable sensation of being exactly where someone wanted her to be. The elevator doors opened without urgency. Adrian stepped out alone. No armed escort, no visible threat. He wore composure like tailored fabric, precise and unwrinkled despite the chaos he had ignited across the city. Rose did not step back. "I expected theatrics," she said evenly. Adrian's lips curved faintly. "I find restraint more persuasive." The waterfront apartment was silent except for the distant hum of the tide against the dock below. Security downstairs had been neutralized, not violently, but efficiently, sedated, contained. Adrian had not come to spill blood. He had come to reposition it. "You shouldn't be here," Rose said. "On the contrary," Adrian replied softly. "This is exactly where I should be." Before she could respond, the private elevator chimed again. "Theo." He entered with controlled speed, eyes instantly locking onto Adrian. The air shifted, tightened, sharpened. "You've miscalculated," Theo said calmly. Adrian glanced at him without fear. "I rarely do. You exposed yourself. I revealed myself," Adrian corrected. "There's a difference." Theo moved slightly closer to Rose, not touching her but closing the gap. Adrian noticed. "You see," Adrian said lightly, "alignment, protection, emotional positioning. Get to your point." Theo replied. Adrian's gaze returned to Rose. "You are the axis, the catalyst neither of them can detach from. Samuel would burn cities for you. Theo would restructure empires." Theo's expression did not change, but something in his stillness deepened. Adrian continued. "And men who prioritize one person over power become predictable." The elevator chimed a third time. This time, Samuel stepped out. The room held its breath. He took in the scene instantly, Adrian standing too comfortably, Theo positioned too protectively, Rose steady but pale. "You shouldn't have come alone," Samuel said quietly to Rose. "I didn't," she replied. The answer carried more meaning than the words themselves. For a suspended second, all four stood within the same fragile geometry, war compressed into a single room. Adrian broke the silence. "How poetic. The three of you finally aligned by necessity." Samuel's gaze never left him. "You detonated an opera house. A controlled warning," Adrian replied. "You were both meant to walk away." "And if we hadn't," Adrian shrugged slightly, "then I would have adapted." Theo stepped forward, voice level. "You're not dismantling an empire. You're destabilizing infrastructure, markets, alliances, civilian sectors." Adrian's smile faded. "You think too small. Theo, empires fall, power redistributes. I simply accelerate what's inevitable. And you needed us divided to do it." Samuel said, "Yes." And now Adrian's gaze shifted between them. "Now I offer you both an exit." Silence. "You walk away." Adrian continued. "Both of you, remove yourselves from leadership. Publicly, gracefully. I consolidate control. Stability returns. She remains untouched." Rose's breath slowed. "You're blackmailing us with peace," Theo said. "I'm offering clarity." Samuel took a measured step closer. "You underestimate one thing." Adrian arched a brow. And that is, Samuel's voice was calm, almost gentle. She is not leverage. The statement did not sound like possession. It sounded like acknowledgement. Adrian studied him carefully. You're willing to step aside. Samuel's eyes flicked briefly to Rose, then back. If it keeps her out of this. The words fractured something in the room. Theo's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. You'd surrender everything. Samuel didn't hesitate. Yes. Rose's heart pounded not from fear, but from the magnitude of what had just been offered. For years, Samuel Trevor had built his empire with ruthless precision, and now he was prepared to dissolve it. For her, Theo's gaze shifted subtly. And you believe he'll let you live peacefully afterward? Adrian smiled faintly. Irrelevant. Theo exhaled slowly. You don't want stability. Adrian's eyes sharpened. I want permanence. And you think eliminating us guarantees that? No, Adrian replied softly. Neutralizing you does. In that instant, Rose understood the flaw in Adrian's strategy. You miscalculated, she said quietly. All three men looked at her. Adrian tilted his head. Enlighten me. You think their attachment makes them predictable? Her voice did not tremble. It doesn't. Theo's gaze softened slightly. Samuel's remained steady. It makes them aligned, she continued. Not against each other, against you. A faint crease appeared in Adrian's composure for the first time. Theo spoke next, voice low. You forced confrontation too early, Samuel added calmly. You assumed rivalry was stronger than clarity. Adrian's smile thinned. You won't both walk away. No, Samuel agreed. We won't. A subtle movement at the doorway shifted the dynamic. Theo's security team, silent. Controlled had regained position downstairs faster than Adrian anticipated. Simultaneously, Samuel's external perimeter tightened. Not chaotic. Coordinated? Adrian's gaze flickered once toward the corridor. You planned this, he said quietly. Theo met his eyes. You're not the only one who adapts. Adrian's posture remained upright, but the room no longer belonged to him. Samuel stepped closer. Voice level. You wanted legitimacy. Yes, you detonated it. A beat. Step down, Samuel said calmly. Now, publicly, transfer your secondary network back into centralized control. Or this ends tonight. Adrian studied him. You'd destroy everything you built to stop me? Samuel's answer came without hesitation. If necessary. The silence stretched long enough to feel like a verdict. Finally, Adrian exhaled softly. You're both more irrational than I calculated. Wrong, Theo replied evenly. We're more deliberate. Adrian glanced once more at Rose. You are fortunate, he said quietly. Men like them rarely coexist. Rose held his gaze. Men like you rarely understand why. For the first time, Adrian's composure fractured not dramatically, but enough. He stepped back. This isn't over, he said. No, Samuel agreed. It is. Security closed in, not violently, but decisively. Adrian did not resist. He understood when the board had shifted beyond recovery. As he was escorted away, the room felt lighter but not victorious. Just quiet. Theo turned toward Rose first. Are you hurt, no? Samuel's gaze followed, searching for signs of fear. He won't reach you again. Rose looked between them. Two men who had nearly destroyed each other now standing in fragile alignment. This was not triumph. It was aftermath. And in the stillness that followed, a different kind of choice began to take shape, one not about power, not about territory, but about what remained when war finally exhaled. Adrian's arrest did not explode across headlines. It unfolded in controlled statements, sealed warrants, silent asset seizures. By morning, the narrative had already been rewritten: financial misconduct, internal restructuring, voluntary resignation pending investigation. Empires do not collapse publicly when powerful men are still standing. They adjust. Samuel ensured it. Theo monitored it. Rose watched it. 3 days later, the city felt almost unchanged. Traffic flowed, markets reopened, deals resumed. But beneath the surface, something fundamental had shifted. The fracture line that once ran between Samuel and Theo no longer pulsed with hostility. It had cooled into something more complex: mutual recognition. In Samuel's office, the skyline reflected against polished glass as he signed the final transfer document, dissolving several aggressive expansion contracts Adrian had initiated. He had not surrendered his empire, but he had reshaped it. Leaner, quieter, less combustible. Adrian had underestimated one thing Samuel did not fear rebuilding. A knock interrupted his thoughts. Rose stepped inside. She had not entered this office since the night of the engagement party. The room still held echoes of that version of them: ambition, expectation, inevitability. Samuel stood slowly. "You look stronger," he said. "I am." The space between them felt different now. Not broken, not fully mended. Honest. "I went back," he said quietly. "To Route 47. She held his gaze. "Why? To understand what I almost lost?" Silence settled gently rather than sharply. "I thought you betrayed me," he continued. "I let fear rewrite reality. You let pride do it," she corrected softly. A faint, self-aware smile touched his mouth. "Yes." He stepped closer, not close enough to touch her, but close enough for truth to land without distortion. "I won't ask you to forget what happened." "I won't," she said. He nodded once. "But I will tell you this: if I ever feel that fear again, I will choose conversation over destruction." The promise was not romantic. It was deliberate. Rose studied him carefully. The man before her was still powerful, still controlled. But something in him had softened, not weakened. Refined. "Then you've already changed," she said. Across the city, Theo stood on the terrace of the waterfront property, overlooking the water that had once mirrored uncertainty. His phone buzzed with updates confirming Adrian's formal exit and asset reallocation under neutral oversight. The storm had passed without annihilation. Footsteps approached behind him. "Rose." He didn't turn immediately. "You met him?" "Yes." And she moved to stand beside him, close enough that their shoulders nearly aligned. "He's rebuilding." Theo nodded slightly. "He's good at that." "And you, I don't rebuild," he said quietly. "I redesign." A faint smile touched her lips. "That sounds lonely." He glanced at her then. It was... The admission lingered. "You were right," he continued after a moment. "This stopped being about territory long ago." "Yes. And I miscalculated something else." She waited. "I didn't anticipate wanting you safe more than I wanted him dismantled." Her breath softened. "You're not detached," she said. No. The word carried weight. Acceptance. Wind brushed lightly across the terrace, carrying the scent of salt and distant rain. The city behind them hummed, unaware of the war that had nearly reshaped it. Samuel arrived shortly after sunset. Not with guards, not with ceremony. Theo saw him first. They regarded each other in silence, two men who had measured, tested, nearly destroyed one another. The rivalry that once burned between them had settled into something steadier. Samuel approached slowly. Adrian signed the final relinquishment this afternoon. "I know," Theo replied. "He won't return." "No." A brief pause. Samuel's gaze shifted to Rose. "I'm stepping back from expansion. Stabilizing. For now." She studied him. "That's not retreat. It's clarity." Theo inclined his head slightly. "Sustainable." Samuel met his eyes. "Temporary alignment doesn't make us allies?" "No." Theo agreed. "It makes us honest." Silence fell again, not hostile, not comfortable. Real. Then Samuel said something neither of them expected. "She chooses." Rose's breath caught softly. Theo's gaze flicked toward her, not with demand, not with claim, simply presence. Samuel stepped back a fraction. "I nearly lost her because I refused to see her as autonomous. I won't repeat that mistake." The decision did not unfold dramatically. There was no grand confession, no theatrical declaration. Just a quiet reckoning. Rose looked at Samuel first. "You taught me strength," she said gently. "But you also taught me how fear can distort love." He accepted that without defense. She turned to Theo. "You taught me clarity," she continued. "And that protection doesn't have to feel like possession." Theo's expression softened in a way it rarely did. The moment hung suspended. Then she stepped not toward the empire, not toward the man who had built it, but toward the one who had chosen to reshape it for her without asking her to disappear inside it. She stopped in front of Theo. Samuel exhaled slowly, not in defeat, but in understanding. "I won't be your war," Rose said softly to Theo. "You won't," he replied. "And you won't make me one. I won't." "Behind them!" Samuel's voice came steady. "If he fails you, he won't," Rose said gently. Samuel nodded once. "Then be happy. No bitterness, no threat, just closure." The city lights flickered on as night settled fully over the skyline. The war that began in snow ended not with collapse, but with choice. Samuel turned and walked toward the elevator, not diminished, but transformed by consequence. He would rebuild differently now, with awareness rather than fear. Theo remained beside Rose, the distance between them no longer strategic, but intimate. "You understand what this means," he said quietly. "Yes. It won't be simple. It never was." He reached for her hand, not to claim, not to restrain, to connect. This time, there were no detonations, no hidden devices, no miscalculations waiting in shadow. Just two people standing at the edge of something uncharted, not because war demanded it, but because they chose it. And for the first time since Route 47, the future did not feel like a battlefield. It felt like possibility.